All right, so we're here. We're going to talk about some local happenings and also kind of talk about what is impeding possible, production of homes in our area, what we see as, weak spots, etc., and some zoning stuff because I love it, so that maybe people can understand a little bit better what some of this means because it's a little legalese for some people.
It is. I mean, I think that the biggest change was that Maura Healey put into a law for the state of Massachusetts that ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units, are allowed on any property, any single family
By
home,
right.
by
in the state of
right.
Massachusetts. State of Massachusetts.
Limitations are it can't be greater than 900 square feet. It has to be served by the same water and sewer, be that city or private, as the house. It has to have one parking space, 900 square feet, or the less of that, or half 50% of the size of the original dwelling. The implementation is going to be interesting because each town is taking a little bit of a different look at it. I just pulled up the information on Newburyport,
which is still being drafted because West Newbury passed this last year, so we're ahead of the curve. So we already have our bylaws for ADUs, but Newburyport didn't allow them before.
No, in fact, you could have an in-law apartment, but it was very restricted. 600 square feet. It had to be a family member that lived there. You couldn't rent it out.
And it also could not be transferable to the next owner, regardless.
That's correct.
If their blood relative was moving in or not.
That's right. It was considered a permit to the family, not a permit to the building.
Yeah.
And I got my hand slapped once for putting something out saying that there was an in-law, and they said, well, it's not an in-law after they move out. So that whole zoning is going to be completely eliminated for in-law, and it's going to be replaced with the ADU. And I was reading some of the draft decision, which is, I think, it's going to be finalized at the next planning board meeting, and I think there's an open meeting when that's being discussed. But basically, it was all the residential areas, so not B1, B2, not waterfront, marine dependent because of environmental sensitivity.
We're talking about residential zoning.
Residential zoning, you can have up to 900 square feet, and it can be detached. So you can build a little house. And oh my goodness, Rach, have you seen any of the little houses people are promoting? You can buy them on Amazon.
Yeah, and I actually, because I'm a design nerd, so when they passed it in West Newbury, I was like, oh, I wonder if I could get a prefabbed mid-century tiny house ADU for my property. You can. And they cost a lot of money, but you can get ones that are more affordable. But so the ones I was looking at were $150,000 to $250,000, but they include all the appliances and everything. It's just, you just have to pay to have it done, right?
Okay,
so the kit includes everything.
Expensive. Maybe that's not expensive because if you had to stick build something,
no, that's true. Yeah, no, in comparison, but maybe for an ADU, it might be more than you would want to spend. Is what I'm saying.
It could be, but think of it this way: if you built it stick built, you're going to be paying about $300 a square foot
on the low end,
without the land because you own the land already. So 900 square feet times 300.
270,000. Wow, math.
Math is not our. Yeah. Anyway, so 270,000 as opposed to 100 or something it's more affordable.
True.
I've also seen that I just saw today that you can actually may be able to have two.
Wow,
which is huge.
Shocking. From Newburyport.
And so I think that there's a big trend, particularly in Massachusetts, to try and find more solutions for affordable housing. And it's I'm sure it's not a panacea. You don't think it's the greatest thing in the world, but we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening that are going in the right direction for sure.
Yep.
The state is doing a lot to help force cities and towns to do things because left to their own devices, they're not going to.
Well, do you know whatever happened with Milton? Because they were fighting it.
I think it's going to court. And the thing is,
that was the not in my neighborhood people.
Yeah, not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard. Thank you.
they decide they're just like not going to conform with the law. So either what's going to happen is the state is suing them, and they're also going to lose their state funding for roads and schools.
That's huge.
It's huge, yeah. Because the issue is right now we have single family only large lot zoning in a majority of the towns in Massachusetts, and the history of that is lengthy and kind of dark, to be honest with you. We're not going to go into all that today, but it was exclusionary by design, right? So it was to create a sense of, what's the word? Scarcity. Scarcity.
Which has worked, because now we don't have enough houses.
Right. Scarcity, exclusivity, and wealth. That's the type of crowd that they were trying to attract with this single family only zoning, because when you look at zoning, you think, oh, well, this 200 feet of setback, that's for safety purposes, or some setbacks are for fire and safety.
Sure.
But a lot of it was because the only people that could afford to build a house with those specifications were wealthy.
Well, I think that there's another piece to it, though, that I heard Rob Ciampetti, who's the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals in Newburyport, he came to the office and spoke, and he said that in the 70s, I don't know whether it was a state mandate, but everybody had to have a master.
It was a state mandate.
To have a master plan and have zoning. And what Newburyport did, because Newburyport was not very wealthy.
Very
back
poor,
then,
yeah.
They could not hire a whole search committee and a design committee and all that. So they just took Andover zoning and put it into Newburyport, which makes no sense because we're talking 20,000 square foot lots. If you go down to the south end, if you find a 8,000 square foot lot, you've got a big lot.
Yeah.
So I think that is, and so as he put it, we're now trying to patch and scratch on top of that with overlays and zoning amendments. So
it should let's just do it over.
Yeah, I know. And there's also a big controversy about why do people need big lawns? It's a very American thing, But yeah, so I think that the ADU thing is a really good direction.
It is a step in the right direction.
Goes into law the end of February. I can't remember the exact date.
Yeah, and so if your city or town doesn't have their bylaws written by then, I think that you can just show up and say, I'm building it. Where's my permit? So if you care about
and
how
it's by right, it's not a special permit.
No, and in fact, the state can't impose. I mean, the city or town cannot impose such restrictive bylaws as to make it impossible for you to build.
Right.
So they can't say, well, you have to have this, and this has to be done, and that has to be done. So that essentially they're making it so that you can't do it, like to discourage the building. They can't do that. That's not allowed by the bill.
Yep.
That Maura Hilly. So it says the word reasonable, and well, what's the definition of reasonable? I think that might be challenged by some cities, unfortunately.
Well, I think there's things like height restrictions and things like that, and it has to conform to the zoning that the house conforms to, which is normal.
Yeah, right.
So you can't make something ginormous next. Well, it's only 900 square feet anyway. So
yeah, and in West Newbury, our rule is that it has to have a distinguished entrance. You can't add
same in Newburyport.
A second driveway. It has to be off of the same driveway. So it can't, and an important thing to add is that you can't condoize these.
But you can rent them.
You can rent them.
So that's huge.
Yeah, and to a non-family member. And the state says that neither one of the houses or properties has to be inhabited by the owner.
That's great. Neither one?
Neither one.
So one thing that's interesting, I think, is that for generational living,
awesome.
It's awesome because you could have a young family or a family that needs 4 bedrooms. Okay, we need 4 bedrooms, and now our kids are grown, and they're having their own child. So you build an ADU, they move into it, and then in 20 years you swap houses. They move into your house, and you move into the ADU. So I think it's a really cool thing. Nantucket has had this for a long time. They call them carriage houses there, of course. But I think it's a great trend.
Yeah, it is.
Last night, the final decision was made on the Brown School, adaptive reuse of the Brown Schools. Don't make that face.
Yeah.
And there were 3 proposals, varying in density. There was a lot of community input.
As there always is.
which you love. And it's going to be primarily for 62 and older. And there's going to be, I believe, 25% affordable. They are going to maintain the gym, which I thought was one of the silliest things I ever heard. Don't hate me. Don't send hate text messages to me. But it's a very, very nice location. And there's other gyms in town, but
yeah, I don't get that.
I don't get it. But it's an emotional thing, and it was an input by the neighbors. But it's going to be a community center, and it kind of the plan looks very nice.
Yeah.
It looks very nice, and it doesn't look like it will dwarf the neighborhood, which I think is a concern because you've got smaller lots and smaller houses in that neighborhood. You're making a face. What are you thinking?
Well, so I'm part of the Newburyport Housing Coalition.
Yeah, so that doesn't make you holier than God.
I didn't say it did.
Just checking.
And we were working with the Y to see if that they to get their RFP approved.
Yep.
And chosen, which was the highest density of all the plans, and it was all affordable and deeply affordable. So as low as 30% AMI, area median income.
And do you know what the AMI is? For 64,000 or something?
No, it's like 110,000.
Oh, okay.
So I just, there's a couple things here that kind of irk me. Like this is just my personal opinion, right? It seems that the only time that we get high density housing passed is if it is for seniors.
But there's a reason for that. It's an economic reason, but it is because they don't want to put more pressure on the schools.
Right. Well, studies have shown that that's actually incorrect.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So high density housing and the taxes that come from those units, because the people that live in those units most likely won't have children, because a majority of people don't have children living in small condos or small
600
apartments.
to 1,000 square
right.
feet.
That typically speaking, people with children don't move into those. So you're not talking about a population that's going to move into those units that all of a sudden is going to overwhelm the school district. That's not going to happen. So they're going to create more taxes than less units would. So at the end of the day, it's actually better to have, for taxes and for funding the schools, to have higher density multifamily apartment or what have you style of buildings. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that I think that the only reason things like that get passed is because the majority of the people that go to these meetings are retirement age. They're the ones that have time to attend these meetings.
People need to get more active.
They do need to get more active. Young people need to get more active. And they, I think that they have objections. It's because they can see themselves living in one of those units, right? Like, so they're saying, well, it would be okay if it was for people like me.
Well, there's two things about it that struck me. One is there was a lot of complaints about traffic. And I thought that was such a riot because we lived on Parsons Street. You went to the Brown School. Your brother went to the Brown School. And Stickney's Market was across the street where they sold cigarettes and lottery tickets and booze. And we would step over them to go in and get our popsicles and Garbage Pail Kids and all that.
Yeah.
And it was joy. At 2:30, you heard all the kids go out. You could hear them on the playground playing.
Buses everywhere.
Buses, cars. Cars would line up on the Prospect Street side, and it was pandemonium, but it was managed pandemonium.
Yeah.
So the parking thing kind of irked me a little bit. Like, really, that's really what you care about?
And this is my opinion, but it feels like we've given neighbors far too much power over what happens.
Well, it doesn't fit. Sometimes too with the neighbor thing. They're concerns that really circumvent the actual zoning.
Right.
I just think that property, the developer looks like they're going to do a nice job.
I'm sure.
That's nice. But it just seems like, the other piece is, I was looking at a chart put out by the city. They had a whole study on housing and projecting what we need, which is more affordable housing. And the numbers of young people moving to Newburyport are so low. 40 to 45, it goes up. You get up to 50 to 70 years old, and it is. So, I mean.
So the young population is already dwindling. So
Yes,
let's create more
senior housing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's perfect. Let's do that.
Yeah. And same thing in West Newbury.
Yeah.
Same problem we have in West Newbury. It's the only, developments that are condoized that seem to get passed are senior housing.
Yeah. Because
I feel like they just aren't threatened.
I think people feel a sense of sympathy too.
Right, because they see themselves in those people. Right. And we do. So you were looking at the housing, the projected housing plan for Newburyport and what they're saying that they need, which was a community meeting I happened to miss because I was working. I wanted to go to it, but what was the plan?
Well, the plan was multi year plan, and I wish I had it in front of me so I could quote it. But it was the first piece was Brown School.
Yeah.
And then they were also looking at surplus real estate that the city owns. So there's a number of lots that either, there's one on Turkey Hill Road, and for instance, in that situation, I think the area was subdivided and this lot was never developed. And so it was turned over to the city. There was a deal with the developer that after a certain amount of time. So they identify in that document 3 or 4 places where they could develop affordable housing on those lots.
Yeah.
I don't know what that mechanism is going to look like.
Or who decides who gets the house.
Well, I think it's more the granular. Can it be rental? Does it have to be rental? Can it be, can it be an end user? I don't know those pieces.
Right.
How many will they allow greater density because they're trying to increase the number? It's a single family 10,000 square foot lot or 20,000 square foot lot. Mm-hmm. You could totally fit 2 or 3 townhouses or smaller units on there.
Unfortunately, our zoning doesn't allow for that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe, but zoning can be changed. I mean, Federal Street is a prime example. When we developed the Federal Street project, the zoning was 20,000 square foot lots with 20-foot setbacks. And if you drive around Federal and Beck Street, there's not a single house that has more than 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of land,
and has zero setback.
Zero setback, right on the road.
Yeah.
So the city was creative, and they put in an overlay for that district to protect the fabric of the town, and said that the houses could be right on the street. Mm-hmm. They could have smaller lots, and what they did in that case was they said the developer would have to. It was a carrot and stick.
Yeah.
You had to give. If you gave if they gave you greater density, you had to restore something. You had to preserve something. You had to put a preservation restriction. That type of thing. Mm-hmm. And that was a creative solution.
And it worked for you guys.
Yeah,
right?
It worked for the neighborhood, too. I think.
No, and it came out beautiful, obviously.
And we varied the prices, and somebody said, well, that's not affordable. No, it wasn't affordable. It was multifaceted, though. There were townhomes at the time that sold for $400,000 and $500,000, and houses that sold for $800,000 and $900,000, and then the 2 big brick houses. So, but now all those units are a lot more expensive. And 25% affordable.
But
yes,
the amount of money, time that it takes for a developer to go through that process to approve, change the zoning or make the zoning work for them or get a variance is part of the reason why housing is so expensive to build, because
trust me. You bring a plan and they say, oh, that's great, but could you move that street over here? And could you do this? And so now you're going back to the designer, back to the engineer, back to the person that does infrastructure. You just spend another $30,000 and you still don't have an approved.
And then you have to wait 3 more months to be seen by the city council or the zoning board to get it approved. And then the neighbors all show up and they say, well, we hate that. And then so then you have to go back and do it all over again. And then people wonder why it costs so much money to build a home, because the loopholes that people have to go through just to get approved to do it is so arduous that by the end of it, it doesn't make sense for them to build anything affordable. The only way they can recoup the cost is to build a luxury property. So
the other thing that I'm hearing from people, I've heard from developers for many years now, that the cost to just get shovel in the ground is huge.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a Boston developer the other day, though, who works for a large development corporation, and he works in the Boston market, and he said there are 230 units of housing in Boston that are permitted that the builders can't build because they can't afford the cost of construction.
Yeah.
So it's coming at them from all directions.
Yeah, right. And that has to do with the manufacturers and the supply companies continuing to overcharge the, supply chain issue costs that we had associated with COVID. Well, we don't have the supply issues anymore, but the
so
prices,
let's make more money.
The prices haven't gone down at all. So, it makes it hard. So, I think it's important that if you care to get involved, I would love to build a tiny house community. I don't know how one would do that, but
I hope you have a lot of
money.
I
don't. Okay. I have a lot of cars instead.
I would sell the cars and do a development. You can't buy.
They don't cost that much money.
All right.
That's it. That's kind of our community update, if you will. We'll tune in next time.
Yeah.
We'll do this again for sure.
We'll have more.
Yes.